Judge Caprio asks, "What's your mother's name?" Defendant's answer changes everything. Sometimes the most important question in a courtroom isn't about the crime, it's about the person. Let me tell you about a morning when I asked a question I almost never ask. A question that had nothing to do with evidence or law or procedure. "What's your mother's name?" And the answer I got, the way that young man's face changed when he said it, made me realize I wasn't looking at a criminal. I was looking at someone drowning in grief who didn't know how to swim. His name was Brandon Pierce, 22 years old, college dropout, working part-time at a warehouse. No significant criminal record, just a few speeding tickets. But he was here because 6 nights earlier, he'd been driving 85 miles per hour on Route 6, weaving between lanes recklessly, nearly causing 3 separate accidents before state police pulled him over. The file said, reckless driving, excessive speed, aggressive driving. Should have been straightforward. But Detective Harris had written a note that caught my attention. Subject was cooperative but seemed emotionally unstable. Officer Williams noted subject was crying when pulled over but wouldn't explain why. No alcohol, no drugs, just driving like he had a death wish. Driving like he had a death wish. That phrase stayed with me. The evidence was clear-cut. Dashboard camera footage from 3 different motorists showed Brandon's Ford Taurus swerving between lanes at high speed. At one point, he cut off a minivan so closely that the driver had to slam on brakes. 20 seconds later, he passed a semi-truck on the right shoulder, illegal and incredibly dangerous. State police had received 4 separate 911 calls about an erratic driver on Route 6 before Officer Williams finally caught up to him and initiated the stop. The toxicology report was clean. No alcohol, no drugs, no prescription medications. Just a 22-year-old driving like the rules of physics and traffic law didn't apply to him. What made Detective Harris's note stand out was the detail he'd included. Brandon had been cooperative during the stop, handed over his license and registration immediately, didn't argue or make excuses, didn't try to explain away the dangerous driving. He just sat there crying and saying, "I'm sorry," over and over again. When Officer Williams asked if he was okay, Brandon said no, but that's not your problem. When asked if he wanted to hurt himself, Brandon said, "I don't know anymore." That answer, "I don't know anymore," was what landed him on psychiatric hold for 72 hours. The charges were filed after he was released, deemed not an immediate danger to himself. But reading that file, I knew there was something deeper happening here, something that standard sentencing guidelines couldn't address. The morning Brandon Pierce walked into my courtroom, I knew something was wrong immediately. Thursday, 9:30 a.m. He came in alone, no attorney, no family, nobody. Just a young man in jeans and a wrinkled shirt that looked like he'd slept in it. What struck me was his face. He wasn't angry or defiant or scared like most defendants. He looked empty, hollowed out, like someone going through motions because they didn't know what else to do. His hair was uncombed. He had dark circles under his eyes, so pronounced they looked like bruises. His hands were shaking slightly, and when he walked, he moved like every step required conscious effort. This was someone barely holding it together. Brandon Michael Pierce, reckless driving, excessive speed, aggressive driving, endangering others. Brandon stood. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you understand these charges?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have an attorney?" "No, Your Honor. I can't afford one. The court can appoint a public defender." "I don't want one, Your Honor." His voice was still flat, empty. "I did what they said I did. I was driving recklessly. I'm guilty." I paused. Most people fight these charges, claim the radar was wrong, say they had an emergency, something, but Brandon Pierce just stood there accepting guilt like he deserved to be punished for existing. Officer Williams came forward to testify about the stop. He was a veteran officer, probably seen thousands of traffic stops, but even he looked affected when he described pulling Brandon over. "Your Honor, I clocked the defendant at 85 in a 55 zone. He was weaving between lanes erratically. I observed him pass vehicles on the shoulder, cut off other drivers, and run a red light at the intersection of Route 6 and Maple Street. When you pulled him over, what was his demeanor?" "Your Honor, he was already crying when I approached the vehicle. Not crying because I'd pulled him over. He was already in that state. He handed me his license immediately and said, 'I'm sorry. I know I was driving dangerously. I deserve whatever happens." Did he explain why he was crying? "No, Your Honor. I asked if he'd been drinking. He said no. I asked if he was on any substances. He said no. I asked if he was okay. He said no, but that's not your problem." Officer Williams looked at Brandon with something like concern. "Your Honor, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've pulled over thousands of people, but I've never seen someone look so broken. That's the only word for it." He looked broken. "What happened next?" "I asked if he wanted to hurt himself. He said, 'I don't know anymore.' That answer concerned me enough to call for a psychiatric evaluation. He was taken to Rhode Island Hospital and placed on 72-hour hold." I looked at Brandon. He was staring at his hands, tears running down his face that he wasn't even trying to hide. "Mr. Pierce, I need to understand what was happening that night. Officer Williams says you were already crying when he pulled you over. Why?" Brandon shook his head without looking up. "I'd rather not say, Your Honor. I need to understand what was happening in your life that made you drive that way." Brandon's whole body was shaking now. "Your Honor, please. I did what they said. I'm guilty. Just sentence me." "Mr. Pierce, I'm trying to understand why a 22-year-old with no criminal record was driving like he didn't care if he lived or died." Brandon flinched at those words, looked up at me with red, swollen eyes that held so much pain it was hard to meet his gaze. "Your Honor, can we please just... I can't talk about it. I can't." His voice broke completely on those last words. That's when I made a decision. Something in this young man's pain reminded me of something from my own life, though I couldn't place what. I decided to trust my instinct. "Mr. Pierce, I'm going to ask you one question, just one. And depending on your answer, I'll decide how to proceed. Can you answer one question for me?" Brandon nodded hesitantly, wiping his face with his sleeve. "What's your mother's name?" The courtroom went completely silent. Brandon's face transformed instantly. The emptiness was replaced with something raw and devastating. His mouth opened, but no sound came out for several seconds. Her name was Diane. Diane Marie Pierce. Was, past tense. The air in the courtroom changed. You could feel it. Several people in the gallery gasped softly. "When did she pass, Brandon?" Brandon's voice broke completely. 6 days ago, Your Honor. 6 days before Officer Williams pulled me over. She died 6 days ago." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Officer Williams's face showed shock. He clearly hadn't known this. Even the court stenographer stopped typing for a moment. Brandon was sobbing now, unable to stop. His whole body shook with it. She had cancer, stage 4 lung cancer. We knew it was coming, but I wasn't ready. I'm not ready. She was only 48 years old. 48. He wiped his face with both hands, but the tears kept coming faster than he could wipe them away. The night Officer Williams pulled me over was the first time I'd left the house since her funeral. I couldn't stay there anymore. Everything reminded me of her. Her coffee mug in the sink, her coat on the hook, her reading glasses on the nightstand. So I just got in my car and started driving. Brandon's voice was getting stronger now, like a dam breaking, like he'd been holding this in for days, and it was finally pouring out. And I kept thinking about how she always told me to drive safely, how she'd worry every time I left the house. She'd text me, "Be careful," even if I was just going to the store. And now she's not here to worry anymore. She's not here to text me. She's not here for anything anymore. Several people in the courtroom were openly crying now. One of the bailiffs wiped his eyes. And I was driving and I realized I didn't care about being safe. I didn't care about speed limits or lanes or red lights. I didn't care about anything. Because the person who cared about me being safe is gone. So I just drove faster and faster. And I wasn't trying to crash, but I also wasn't trying not to. I just wanted to feel something other than this pain. Brandon collapsed back into his chair, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. His whole body was shaking. The sound of his grief filled the courtroom raw, unfiltered, devastating. I had to take a moment myself, reached for the glass of water on my bench, wiped my own eyes, because I understood now. This wasn't reckless driving. This was a young man who'd lost his mother and didn't know how to survive the grief. If you're watching this and you've ever lost someone who meant everything to you, subscribe to Judge Stories YT right now, because what I do next shows that sometimes justice requires understanding pain, not just punishing mistakes. I let Brandon cry. Let him release some of that grief in a courtroom that suddenly felt less like a place of judgment and more like a place of witnessing. Sometimes people need permission to fall apart, and sometimes a courtroom can be that place. When he finally looked up, his face was red and streaked with tears. His eyes were swollen, but there was something in his expression now, relief, maybe, like he'd been carrying this alone for so long that saying it out loud, even in a courtroom, lifted some of the weight. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm so sorry. I know that's no excuse. I could have killed someone. I could have destroyed another family like mine is destroyed. I could have made someone else feel what I'm feeling. I deserve whatever punishment you give me." "Mr. Pierce, tell me about your mother." Brandon looked surprised. "Your Honor? Tell me about Diane. What was she like?" Brandon took a shaky breath, wiped his face again, and for the first time since walking into my courtroom, something other than pain crossed his face. Something soft. A memory. She was the best person I ever knew. She raised me by herself after my dad left when I was 5. She worked 2 jobs, morning shift at a nursing home, evening shift at a grocery store to put me through school. She never missed a single one of my baseball games, even when she was exhausted. He smiled slightly through his tears, a real smile, even if it was broken. She used to make these terrible jokes, dad jokes, even though she was my mom. She'd laugh at them herself even when nobody else did. She thought she was hilarious, and she was strong, so strong. Even when the cancer was killing her, she was worried about me, about whether I'd be okay after she was gone. His voice broke again. The last thing she said to me, the night before she died, was, "Promise me you'll be okay, Brandon. Promise me you'll live a good life. Don't let my dying stop you from living." And I held her hand and I promised her. I looked her in the eyes and I promised her I'd be okay. He was crying hard now, but kept talking through it. And 6 days later I was driving 85 miles per hour, weaving through traffic, not caring if I crashed. I broke my promise to her. The last promise I ever made to her, and I broke it before her grave was even settled. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for Brandon's crying and the quiet sniffling of people in the gallery who were crying with him. "Mr. Pierce, where's your father now?" Brandon's face hardened slightly. "I don't know, Your Honor. He left when I was 5. Walked out one day and never came back. I haven't seen him since. Didn't come to my high school graduation. Didn't come when my mom got diagnosed. Didn't come to her funeral. It was just her and me my whole life. Other family? My mom was an only child. Her parents, my grandparents, died when I was a kid. No aunts or uncles, no cousins. It was just her and me, and now it's just me." Brandon said those last words, "Now it's just me," with such devastating loneliness that I had to step away from the bench for a moment, turn my back to the courtroom and compose myself because I was dangerously close to breaking down myself. When I turned back, I'd made a decision. One that might be unconventional, but one that felt right in a way I couldn't fully explain. "Mr. Pierce, I'm going to tell you something about myself, something I don't usually share in court." Brandon looked up, confused. "My mother died when I was 24 years old. Heart attack, sudden. One day she was there making Sunday dinner, the next day she was gone. And I remember that first week after. I remember feeling like the world had ended, like nothing mattered anymore because the person who mattered most was gone." Brandon was listening now, really listening. His crying had quieted to silent tears streaming down his face. "And I remember doing stupid things, reckless things. Not because I wanted to die, but because I couldn't feel anything except pain, and I thought maybe if I did something extreme, I'd feel something different. Anything different." I looked directly at Brandon. "So when I read that you were driving like you had a death wish 6 days after your mother died, I understood. Not legally what you did was dangerous and wrong, but humanly, I understood." Brandon nodded, more tears falling. "Your Honor, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be alive when she's not. She was my whole world. Everything I did was for her. To make her proud. To make her sacrifices worth it. And now she's gone, and I don't know why I'm supposed to keep going. I know. And I'm going to tell you something that might not help right now, but will eventually. It gets easier. Not easy, but easier. You learn to carry the grief instead of drowning in it. You learn that loving someone who's gone doesn't require dying yourself." I sat back down at my bench, looked at Brandon for a long moment, then at the file in front of me, then back at this broken young man who needed help, not punishment. "Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Pierce. I'm finding you guilty of reckless driving and endangering others. You put lives at risk that night, including your own. That can't be ignored or excused. Brandon nodded, accepting it. I understand, Your Honor. But instead of jail time, I'm ordering mandatory grief counseling, twice a week for 6 months minimum. You're going to talk to a professional about Diane, about losing her, about learning to live without her, about keeping your promise to her. Your Honor, I'm not finished. You're also going to do 150 hours of community service, but not picking up trash or cleaning parks. You're going to volunteer at Rhode Island Hospital's oncology ward. You're going to sit with cancer patients who don't have family. Be there for them the way you were there for your mother. Brandon looked stunned. Your Honor, I don't know if I can. Being around cancer patients, it'll remind you of Diane. I know. That's the point. You're going to honor her memory by being for other patients what you were for her. Compassionate, present, caring. I could see Brandon processing this, the resistance in his face slowly transforming into something else. Understanding, maybe. And finally, your license is suspended for 90 days. Not as punishment, but as protection. You're not in a place to be driving right now. In 90 days, after you've been in counseling for a while, after you've started processing this grief, we'll revisit whether you're ready to drive again. Brandon was openly crying again, but differently now. Not the desperate, broken sobbing from before. Something softer. Your Honor, that's very merciful. More merciful than I deserve. It's not mercy, Mr. Pierce. It's understanding. Your mother spent 22 years raising you to be a good person. She worked 2 jobs so you could go to school. She never missed your games even when she was exhausted. She fought cancer for, how long did she fight? 3 years, Your Honor. 3 years of chemo and radiation and surgeries. 3 years of pain. But she never gave up because she said she had to be here for me. 3 years of fighting to be here for you. I'm not going to honor her memory by destroying the son she loved by sending you to jail when what you need is help. Diane Marie Pierce didn't sacrifice everything so her son could waste his life in a cell or wrapped around a telephone pole. Brandon broke down completely. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. I promise I'll do the counseling. I'll volunteer. I'll do everything you're asking. I won't let my mom down again. You haven't let her down, Brandon. You're grieving. That's not failure. That's love with nowhere to go. Now we're going to give it somewhere to go. As Brandon was preparing to leave the courtroom, something unexpected happened. Officer Williams, who'd been standing near the back, approached him. Mr. Pierce, can I speak with you for a moment? Brandon turned, looking nervous. Yes, officer. I'm sorry for your loss. My mother died 2 years ago. Also cancer, stage 4 breast cancer, and I want you to know that the first few months after, I did some stupid things too. Nothing as dangerous as what you did, but stupid, angry, reckless in other ways. Brandon looked surprised. You did? Yeah. I got in fights. Said things to my wife I regretted. Pushed away everyone who tried to help. Because grief makes you crazy sometimes. Makes you do things that don't make sense. Officer Williams pulled out a card from his wallet. This is the grief counselor who helped me. Dr. Linda Martinez. She specializes in young adults who've lost parents. I'm going to recommend Judge Caprio assign you to her specifically. She understands what you're going through. Brandon took the card with shaking hands. Thank you, officer. I'm sorry about your mom. Me too. But it gets easier. Like the judge said, not easy, but easier. And 2 years later, I can think about her without it destroying me. You'll get there too. The 2 men stood there in that courtroom having a moment of shared understanding about loss that transcended their roles. Officer Williams added, And Brandon, your mom was right to worry about you driving safe. Because you matter. Your life matters. Even though she's gone, you still matter. Brandon nodded, unable to speak, fresh tears rolling down his face. Subscribe to Judge Stories YT because what happens 6 months later proves that sometimes the right sentence isn't about punishment, it's about healing and transformation. 6 months later, I got a letter from Brandon Pierce. It was handwritten on lined paper. The handwriting was neat and careful. Dear Judge Caprio, I'm writing to tell you that I completed my 6 months of counseling with Dr. Linda Martinez. All 6 months, twice a week, 52 sessions total. At first, I hated it. Hated talking about my mom. Hated crying in front of a stranger. I almost quit after the third session. But Dr. Martinez told me something that changed my perspective. She said, talking about your mother isn't about making yourself sad. It's about keeping her alive in your memory. Every story you tell about Diane is a way of saying she mattered. So I kept going, and slowly it started helping. Dr. Martinez taught me that grief isn't something you get over. It's something you carry. And carrying it doesn't mean I can't still live. My mom wouldn't want me to stop living because she stopped. I also completed my 150 hours at the hospital. Your Honor, thank you for that assignment. I was terrified at first, thought it would be too painful, but it ended up being the most important part of my healing. I met patients going through what my mom went through, but many of them were alone. No family, no visitors, just facing cancer by themselves. I sat with them, talked to them, held their hands when they were scared, read to them when they couldn't sleep. And it felt like I was honoring my mom, like I was being there for someone the way I was there for her. One patient, an elderly woman named Rosa Sanchez, told me 2 days before she died that I reminded her of her grandson she hadn't seen in years. She said, "Your mother raised you right. She'd be proud." I cried for an hour after she said that. Reading that letter, I had to stop several times to compose myself. This was why I became a judge, not to punish people, but to see beyond the crime to the person. A year after the initial sentencing, Brandon came to see me. He'd gained some weight, a good sign. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. His hair was combed. He looked like someone who was sleeping at night again. "Judge Caprio, I wanted to tell you in person what I'm doing now." "Tell me, Brandon." "I'm in my second semester of college. Social work major, 4 gigapascals so far, and I'm running a grief support group for young adults who've lost parents. We meet twice a week, 8 members so far, but growing." "That's wonderful, Brandon. And I'm still volunteering at the hospital. Not because I have to anymore, but because I want to. I'm there every Tuesday and Thursday evening. I've sat with 42 cancer patients over the past year. 13 of them passed away, but they didn't pass away alone." He pulled out a small photo from his wallet, a woman in her 40s, with Brandon's eyes and smile, laughing at something off camera. She was wearing a headscarf going through chemo, but her smile was radiant. "She raised a good man, Brandon. She raised me the best she could, and now I'm going to live the life she wanted me to live. That's my promise to her." Brandon pulled out a worn, folded piece of paper from his wallet. My sentencing order from a year ago. He'd kept it. Carried it with him. "Judge, when you asked, 'What's your mother's name?' you didn't ask what was your mother's name. You asked IS, present tense, like she still existed, and that made me realize she does still exist. In my memories. In the person she made me, in the work I do now. Diane Marie Pierce is still here. She's still making the world better through me." "What did he say?" He said, "How do you know?" And I showed him my court order from you. Showed him that when I was where he is now, a judge saw past my crime to my pain. And that seeing my pain saved my life. And now I'm going to save his. This piece of paper is why I'm alive, Judge Caprio. Why I'm in college. Why I'm helping other people. Why I'm keeping my promise to my mom. Thank you for asking the right question. After Brandon left, I sat in my chambers thinking about that morning a year ago. About a broken young man crying in my courtroom. About asking a simple question. "What's your mother's name?" My father always told me, "Frank, sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. The law says punish the crime. Justice asks why the crime happened and what the person needs." Brandon Pierce committed a crime. He drove recklessly and endangered lives. The law said he deserved jail time. But justice asked a different question. What does this young man need? And the answer wasn't a cell. It was help, understanding, permission to grieve, a way to transform his pain into purpose. Diane Marie Pierce spent 22 years teaching her son to be a good person. She worked 2 jobs so he could go to school, never missed a game. Fought cancer for 3 years worrying about him until her last breath. I wasn't going to dishonor her memory by destroying the son she loved. I was going to help him become the man she believed he could be. Brandon now helps other young people who've lost parents. He sits with dying cancer patients who have nobody else. He lives the life Diane wanted him to live, a life of compassion, service, and honoring her memory. I'm Frank Caprio. Remember, before you judge someone's actions, ask about their pain. Ask about the people they've lost. Ask the questions that reveal the human being behind the crime. Because sometimes the most important question in a courtroom isn't about what they did, it's about who they are, who loved them, and why they're worth saving. Thanks for listening, and God bless.